Good evening from beautiful Bunurong country. We are broadcasting to you live from right here in the Karam Karam swamp from the ancient traditional lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation. As always, thank you for joining us for another evening of radio architecture. My guest and conversation partner tonight is Dan Szwaj. He's an architect and director at Sydney-based practice Turner. Dan's sense of collaboration and belief in the collective are clear threads throughout his work. It was the opportunity to collaborate on a broad scale and contribute to impactful projects that first lured the current director to Turner back in 2002. His unwavering social and environmental consciousness is woven through every project, from student and seniors living to affordable housing to workplaces, alongside his penchant for challenging the status quo. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Thanks, Ilana.
So good to have you on. Listeners, you can see once again this week I'm alone in the studio, so hello to everyone who's watching us live there on YouTube too. Dan is tuning on the phone line, dialing in. Where are you calling in from tonight?
Yeah, I'm calling from Gadigal country, so in Sydney, in Darlinghurst, where our office is. So I'm still at work and taking the opportunity to have a chat with you from here.
I love it. We can have conversations across this massive continent of Australia and really cover what feels like a breadth of architectural styles and activity and variety and everything that's happening. And you guys are really leading perhaps the housing construction space in apartments at the moment. I don't feel we're quite building as much as you are in New South Wales, down here in Victoria, where we're broadcasting from on Radio Karam. So I'm really keen to get stuck into some of those topics later tonight.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, there's been a real push in Sydney for more housing. And so I think the question and the topic is about housing affordability or affordable housing. So that's what to talk about it in terms of that as a topic as well.
There's a question I love to ask all my guests at the beginning of the conversation, and you are a listener and a fan of the show, so I'm sure you're sitting on the edge of your seat anticipating this one, and I'll be nice. I will give you that question. What is your earliest memory of a building or place?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, and listening to some of the other guests as well, it got me thinking. I grew up in Melbourne, and I used to think I know I'll get to it quickly, but my dad used to take me to the galleries, and so I wouldn't say he was artistic, but he did appreciate the fact that it would be good for awareness. So in terms of Melbourne, the National Gallery of Victoria was one of my favourite buildings.
Roy Grounds.
And I think the Roy Grounds building. So that entry with the water on the entrance glass, as a kid you can't resist not touching it.
Were you one of the kids pressing your face, both hands on your face straight into it?
Yeah. And when I went inside, I think it was probably at Christmas time, but it was in the Great Hall, and that stained glass ceiling just absolutely blew my mind.
The largest stained glass ceiling in the Southern Hemisphere, is it not?
No, I'm not sure about that, but Leonard French, I mean, as an artist, I think he's pretty amazing, and that just captured me. So whenever I go to Melbourne, I always look for the opportunity to go back to the National Gallery. I just think it's an awesome building and space. So that's it. That's for me the earliest memory of something that was impactful. And there's a lot of spaces you go through as kids that you don't really remember, but I think as a real space it is. But I'll give you a left field one. It was, I think, as a kid, movies and spaces in movies really challenge you and change your perception of space as well. So for me, I'm not really a Star Wars buff, but Star Wars, the original episode 1, I'm kind of showing my age a bit now, but the architecture in that, especially in terms of the final scene, where the actual X-fighters or X-wings, whatever you want to call them, are flying through the kind of canyon, just the scale of space and how that was perceived, that really changed my perception. I couldn't get that movie out of my life or dreams for a long time. It just changed how I saw space and places as well.
Did you know that architecture was an option for you as a career path?
I think I've always been an architect. So even as a kid, I would be trying to work out drawing our house in terms of the plans and the arrangements, and looking at other people's houses and trying to work out that. But in my street, I was really fortunate to have two other, practicing architects one next door and one up the road. And going to their homes, I was always blown away at how different their spaces were and how considered they were in terms of the detailing and the way they did the staircases. I don't think they were completely amazing spaces, but they were incredible in terms of departing from the suburban house topology and
breaking the norm.
Really, breaking the norm. They just did things that you wouldn't expect. So, and as architects, they're quite predictable spaces, but they're really interesting, and I really enjoyed being in their homes. And that was that. I think gave me a really good grounding and made me really interested or inquisitive in terms of architecture and spaces. That's kind of where it started from, I think. Yeah.
Did you go straight to architecture school at uni?
Sure did. So there was no 2 seconds thought about doing something else, and so I went straight to architecture school, and I think that was okay. Like there's people talk about travelling and before you study. I did in that time. Like there was RMIT, Melbourne, and Deakin, and so I probably wasn't the most studious of types. So I think I got a good balance in terms of studying and going out. But I got into Deakin and I missed out on the interview process with RMIT. It was quite different. It's always been different there, but I missed out on that. And there's no students from high school that actually got into that year. It was all mature age students in that particular year. So I don't think I think they're looking for someone else, which is fine. That's okay. I'm really happy with the path that I ended up taking.
What brought you to Sydney?
Listen, I'd say Levius Woods. So in a roundabout way. So I studied in Australia for 3 years and then did my 4th year overseas in the States. And that really blew my mind in terms of the architects that are out there and the different people that we were engaged with in terms of the school and understanding that you could reach out to these people, go to the studios and have a look. So Levius Wood I was really intrigued with, and he had a talk up in Sydney, and as one of the kind of what do you call them? The kind of yearly
guest lecture,
industry events, yeah. Right? And so he was there, and I thought I've got to go there. So I had some frequent flyer points. Didn't have any money, but I had frequent flyer points. So I flew up here and stayed with a friend, and realised this is a pretty cool place. The Olympics were coming here, and I thought I'd get a job really easily, but I didn't. But I moved up here just on a whim after I finished my degree. When I came back to Australia, finished my degree and came up here.
Wow. Well, they say you've got to go somewhere different for a change to occur. But tell me if this is true or not, because we were told this in undergraduate, this mythical story of Levius Woods, that after he sued Hollywood for plagiarism of stealing one of his designs in one of the monster robots in a film, that was it. He basically retired and stopped doing architecture and lived off that court case and took up some unhealthy hobbies.
You're talking about, I think, the 12 Monkeys, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was the movie with Brad Pitt.
And there's probably his most famous drawing. That was the one that got knocked off.
Yeah, that's disappointing. It's not a nice way to be flooded in terms of your work being used by someone else. But he was really interesting. Like as a person, like that architecture that's more about revolt than it is about embracing spaces. Like Sarajevo was one of his main pieces of work, and looking at how you can adapt spaces afterwards. So I really liked the way that he took spaces and made them into something else. And it was just radical, just something that you would never be taught at uni or look at or expect to see. So I really like that way of just being taken on a journey that you would never expect, and that people were thinking like that. So it was really good.
Oh, that drawing, I will have to share it with our listeners on the Instagram follow-up post as well. But it was just madness, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
I'm interested in that you were drawn to this, right, as a precedent, as a mentor to Levius's work, and it seems diametrically opposite to your personality that I'm sure listeners could come hear that you're coming across as very, very warm, and even your practice describes you this way because I think you deal with very, very human topics in your work.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say my work follows Livius Wood's approach, but I'd say the questioning and how you interrogate architecture to look at things differently is super important, and not just take things for granted and looking at the same way. You always got to look at things differently. So that learning or that approach to understanding a site differently still underpins the way I think about architecture, but not necessarily how I would curate or how I would see a space evolving, but it's still there. Like I think his work and illustrations are just absolutely beautiful.
How do you stay creative? What's your best tool to continue pushing those ideas?
Staying creative, I think you have to be eternally optimistic. And it's hard. I think in architecture it's hard. There's so many different forces that are always trying to, I don't think intentionally, but there's always these forces that try and push that away and not really accepting it, or they're not ready to accept it. And then later on you see someone else or they accept it later on. It's a journey. So I think it takes time. And you've got to look at it differently. I think you need to have a break. You can't, you take it seriously. And after a number of years, I've learned not to take it personally. And so I think initially, especially at uni, you take a lot of things really personally, and your life is over if you don't get a good review. But I think you need to understand the target audience and who you're talking to and whether they're ready for something, and to gradually introduce it. Maybe you don't. Sometimes I've learned not to talk about a particular aspect of a project with a group or a client because they might not understand it, but it's probably not that relevant either to the topic. You need to understand what they're interested in, focusing on that, and other things can fill in. I probably answered that in a roundabout way, but I think it's one of the hardest things to work out. But you need other things to do in life as well. Travel. You need something to get you away from that, rather, because work can be such a time-consuming pastime as well as work as well, and it's a hobby. So you need to kind of break that a little bit in life. Get some other things to do.
What's your biggest lesson from architecture school and those years in Melbourne that you still carry with you to this day?
I would say trust your intuition. You need to trust your intuition. It doesn't take a long time to figure that out. I think the one thing I always counter is that my first reaction is that you need to draw something or draw your way out of something, but I don't think you always need to draw. We've got other tools that we're really good as architects. We obviously can draw, we can present really well, we can communicate, we can talk to people. So I think you've got to choose the right tool for the particular purpose. And we always start off drawing something. So the client comes to you with a problem, you start drawing. I think that's the best way to do it, but maybe it's catching up, have a conversation with them, go to site, look at the issues, listen to them. Because drawing takes a long time. It takes a long time to do drawings. I think the other one is, and I'm finding it more in our practice, is that people are reluctant to sketch, to draw freehand. There's a nervousness or hesitation. I think the sketches are quite evocative and easy to do. Once you get your style and find your style, then the sketch can be done really quickly, and it's amazing what that can convey really quickly to a client or to a group of people, rather than a CAD drawing or something that you have to label on a lot to resolve.
My favourite party trick is sketching upside down in meetings.
Yeah, well, funny that. I remember catching up with a client a few years ago, and I remembered him from a meeting, like from a project, and he said to me, I remember when you came to a meeting and you sketched upside down, and it blew our mind. It blew our mind that you could actually do that. I forgot all about it, but it's funny how such a big impression the ability to sketch is on people, because it's a form of communication that it's rapidly understood and absorbed.
There's the Age wrote about one of the projects that yourself and the practice Turner worked on, they wrote about the Baronia apartments that it was greeted with tears of joy. So, and you're talking about a memory, that reaction is what spurred me forward onto this topic. We don't often hear that about architecture. We don't often hear that
you
about
don't.
projects.
Yeah, and I think you're referring to Kerry Ann, who's a resident at Baronia Apartments. So Baronia Apartments is an affordable housing project we did, and we're doing a few of those. And what's really interesting about those is that they're below market rate, so they're subsidised housing, and Citywest Housing is the client for that. Kerry Ann was priced out of her apartment in Potts Point, from memory, and basically she couldn't afford anything within the city area anymore. She'd been in that apartment for quite a while, and so she went past this construction site that was coming up and looked at it and got in touch with Citywest Housing to express her interest, and was in touch for quite a while, and was lucky enough to get an apartment there. And so when she moved in, she said the place was, she was expecting affordable, compromised housing. And the way we approach it is we want the housing to be, which you call tenure blind, but basically look like any other project. And for our team, we put as much love, if not more, into these projects, knowing who our future kind of clients will be, or residents. And so we detail the same. We look at the spaces and what through those, the communal spaces, the areas to interact. And so when she went in there, she goes, this place has been really thought about. And so that kind of evoked that sense of relief that obviously there's housing, but also the space was not substandard. And it was really a good compliment. It's not often you get to meet the future residents when you're doing a lot of market style housing, and the projects are really big. You do get to meet people, and you find out they might say they live in a particular suburb and they'd say a particular street, and then you go, okay, I think I might know the building you're in, which level? And you go, is that the apartment on the corner, which has got the balcony that overlooks the courtyard space? And so sometimes you can freak people out like that as well, and you know where they are. So.
Maybe that's the party trick, to not bring out that often. But with Baronia Apartments, it's that those balconies, those stairs, it's open to air, you've got views, and really an elegant, restrained form and facade. You look at a building like that and you think that's going to be an excellent asset today and long into the future.
Yeah, with that project, and it's similar to the way we approach projects, where we look at the kind of the key design principles that we think are important, and from that we'll establish the key moves. So for us, it was to make sure that the residents have a really high level of amenity, and that they don't have to pay a lot of ongoing costs. So there's solar panels on the roof to reduce costs, but for apartment design, and this goes for I think most Australian cities, especially in some areas that you need a lot of natural ventilation. And so we made sure that all the apartments were naturally ventilated so that they're open on both sides. So you've got the balcony side and the actual open corridors allows you to have it's a hopper style window, like a window above a door that you can open and leave open, and you can leave your door closed. So you get this really nice cross ventilation through there, which means you don't have to use air conditioning. There's fans installed. The depth of the building is shallow, so you don't have to use artificial lighting during the day. So we really wanted to make sure that they had a high level of amenity, and the way that courtyard works is that's the focal point. Everyone arrives and moves through that space. So you've got that kind of incidental bumping into neighbours, but still having your own level of privacy when you go into your apartment. So there was some really just simple moves. Like there's nothing complicated about that building. It's just kind of drawing down on what are the really important things to adopt or utilise in terms of the design. And so it just made sense for us. And the other thing is to make sure there's a lot of front doors to the street. There's a key arrival space, and that the courtyard gets lots of sunlight. It's not complicated. And I think sometimes as architects we can overcomplicate things. But what helped was the clients great, and they're really invested in the projects. They're at the table helping us. And through that process and distilling what's really important. And it's cost sensitive, so it's really about this kind of uneven spending. So don't spend a lot of money somewhere, but there's a budget, but making sure maybe it's the way you set up the kitchen and the bathrooms, you might spend some money there, but don't spend it in the car park. Don't worry about that. And all the materials are long lasting, so you use brick. It's not just about the first 5 or 10 years. So they're great. They're a really good client.
So important to have that vision and to keep maintenance low as well. Nothing breaks my heart more when it's new and within a couple of years it's built and so flimsy and not integral materials and it's crumbling. And I found myself over time moving more and more into the camp of really true sustainability comes from the longevity and the long-term beauty of the project.
Definitely. And for us, our client group, I think overall appreciates that. And the projects where the clients are holding onto the assets, that's always forefront for them, the long-term cost, not just the initial side of things.
I want to ask your practice has also been working on effectively fully integrated hubs. Showgrounds Village is one of them, where I think listeners might be a bit more familiar with this 20-minute, 15-minute city neighbourhood type of idea, where everything is within quick and accessible range, and this way you're kind of condensing it into a building and more into an immediate neighbourhood. But why do you think that idea of the 15-minute city or the 20-minute city gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes? Why is there a public perception against it?
I don't know. The first time I've heard it.
You've not come across it.
So we in Sydney with the metro line that was set up. It was about a 30-minute city. So there's a 30, 20-minute, and we kind of design our projects about a 5-minute neighbourhood. So your everyday needs within kind of five minutes. So I don't know whether they got a bad, maybe not here, but I think architecture there's always going to be criticism about things changing or a particular approach, but I think it's pretty sound that you're looking at a city, a 30-minute city, you can get around. Showgrounds is right next to a metro station, Showgrounds Metro Station, which connects Castle. It's in a suburb called Castle Hill, and which is, I think most people call like an outer suburb, but it's really leafy and green, and it's got a lot of attraction in terms of sporting fields, and it's big blocks and things like that. I live in the inner city in Newtown, so it's completely different to that. But it's a long way away in terms of vehicle, going by car, and the metro has changed that. And obviously with that, it's changed the housing topologies that come with it. So Showgrounds is apartments over a retail precinct right next to the metro station, which is like less than a 2-minute walk from the front door.
I think awesome connectivity, right? Just to live and experience that sort of connection would be like being one of the greatest world-class cities, to have everything at your doorstep.
Yeah, I really think the metro in Sydney has changed the experience of travelling on public transport for one. The metro stations are awesome, really, really beautiful pieces of architecture, and just that connectivity that you can move through Sydney relatively smoothly and get to places that would have taken ages before. So I'm really looking forward to that continuing and the development around the stations continuing. As an architect, it's good. Yeah.
With some of these new urban developments, sometimes the biggest challenge is that they all feel super new and sometimes super big. I wonder, what are some of your best strategies for embedding the fine grain or that detail, those small bits of uniqueness that make more established areas or more inner city areas feel?
I think that's the big question, isn't it? That's the biggest thing.
The great urban planning challenge.
Yeah. The one thing I learned a while ago is that, and we do a lot of mixed-use residential. When I say residential, medium to high density, but we've also moved into urban design. So we do a lot of urban design projects as well. So Bradfield is one of the projects that we're involved in, which is near the new airport. But when I started working on those type of projects, I realised that the buildings themselves aren't as important. But they come along, but you need to get the streets right. You need to get the ground plan experience right. You need to get the landscape. You've got to be really good friends with the landscape architect.
And the
And they
traffic
need to be part of
engineers.
the team. Well, not really. You need to. I don't think that the traffic engineer is a bit of a hindrance, but I think you can work with them. But the idea is that you need to create these streets for people and that ground level experience. The kind of the first 4 stories that young girl was spot on, and I really love his work and the work his office does. Where they talk about that street level experience, it's the first 4 floors that you need to really get right, and that needs to be really engaging. And we know that when we walk down streets, that's really active with shop fronts, the diversity, compared to somewhere where it's a continuous wall. You know, even if it's windows, there's no variation there. It starts to you start to lose interest. It gets a bit. It's not as interesting or engaging to walk down. So we start there, and so I figured out that people aren't that interested. When we did presentations, and I went through, I figured out, don't talk about the buildings. You got to talk about the streets. As architects, the first thing we want to talk about is the building, like how good this building is, what we've done, what we've achieved, with the design. But people are going, oh, what's it like to be walking down the streets? What's it like in that area? And so I've learned to start there, and then the building should start to respond to that approach. So whether it's fine-grained laneways, start to set up the site based on that, through site links. What streets are the more active? Which ones are the more kind of residential or kind of neighbourhood in feel? And then start to plan out the building or the design to respond to that. And then the materiality and the character kind of falls out of that. So I think don't try and force something onto a site that's there. I mean, the other thing which we deal with is we're changing places from low density to high density. So it's how you manage that increase in the amount of people living there, what amenities on offer in your project or in the surrounding areas, how to get there easily, but also how to start to articulate or shape that building so that it fits into the context, whether it's got a podium, whether it's got a tower set back, whether it's a courtyard topology building, which is kind of not too high, not too low. So it starts to shape it, and obviously the size of the site influences that as well.
When you're working on multi-res projects that perhaps have a developing client, do you work with developer clients?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day, yeah.
And some developers are really attached to the idea of legacy, and you could really pull that lever to advocate for good design. But I wonder, for those for whom maybe legacy isn't the strongest word in their vocabulary yet, how do you get people to care?
So I think anyone that's trying to build something, whether it's the architect, builder, or the developer, they're leaving a legacy that I think they all want to be proud of. But there's different ways of expressing their pride in a project. So some might be more interested in how quick to build it or the building technology. But overall, I think there's a sense of alignment that they want to make sure that there is a legacy that is a positive one. But we're all relying on each other to get the best result. So I'm kind of being a bit diplomatic. Like, there's all these arguments you have on projects, whether something goes through or not, or how to build it and what material it is. But I think we need each other to make sure that we get the right mix. And as architects, we need to I think, not necessarily push back, but if we don't think something's going to work or it's not appropriate, I think we need to speak our mind. And I am always surprised that if it's done in the right way and the right time, how appreciative they are that we're actually expressing an opinion, not just following what they've told us to do. And sometimes you just need to listen as well. There's times when they'll tell you what to do, you need to listen and take it on board and think about your position and whether it's appropriate in the context. Are you right? Maybe you're not right. And that's one of the things the question you asked me earlier at architecture school. Listen, just listen. Don't react straight away. You've got to listen to these things and take it on board. So you talk about me being calm. Maybe that's good in those kind of environments because sometimes you don't want to be calm. But if you can take it on board and listen to it and then take it away and come back with your response, I'd say we typically get a good outcome. It may not be the original direction we thought it was going to head in, but it's a good outcome, and it's responding to the kind of different pressures or the different opportunities that present themselves.
Well, it's all about best for projects outcomes at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
I'm wondering, what does good design mean to you?
Oh, that's a big question. Good design, good design, you talked about legacy before. I think you got to be proud of what you've put together. Design is different for everyone. Good design is, I'd say, in terms of built form, a project that responds to the site, anticipates future changes. You're not going to be able to predict it, but anticipates some ways and is adjustable over time. I think it's something that other people look at, and they get their own enjoyment out of it as well. Like I'm always surprised on projects when people start talking about it, and I don't actually at first know which project they're talking about, but it's one of the projects we may have done, but they see it through a different lens and a different way that they use or occupy the space that I don't appreciate. And it even goes with sometimes with photographers. Like I remember doing a project Silkwood a number of years ago, and Shannon McGrath took the photographs. And when I saw the photographs, I never saw the building the way that she saw it. And I thought that was really interesting to have someone else, it's a bit cliche, but looking through the lens of someone else in terms of how they do it. But I was really amazed at the angles or what she saw as being the key parts of the building, or how it interfaced or interacted with its context. So that was, for me, really interesting. I work with other photographers who are awesome, but that was, I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, anyone who's involved in the process, be it at the very end just to photograph it, it becomes a creative collaboration ultimately.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that are involved in bringing a project into existence and making a building real. Certainly in the case of the Turner team. What's the hardest?
There's always,
I don't go
Sorry.
from...
I was going to say there's always a number of people in our teams, and so it's rare that you've only got one or two people. So our projects are quite large. So you'd have 3 to 5 to 10. So we're doing a project at the moment, and I'm probably won't get the exact numbers, but we're doing timber yards in Marrickville. It's probably about 18 people on the team, and working collaboratively with other people. So all up, there's maybe 30 designers. Then you've got all the other supporting people as well who are supporting the design in terms of getting that through. So there's always a lot of people that you need to align, make sure that their voice is heard, and they're kind of contributing to the project.
What's the hardest leadership lesson you've had to learn?
That you're not always right, and that I think it's sometimes not leading from the front, but also giving people support that they need to move through, so that you don't always have to have the right decision. You need to kind of bring the team along, get them to take the opportunity, take the risk, and like myself, you're going to make mistakes. You always going to make mistakes, but allow them to make the mistakes in the project and learn from them and be better architects as a consequence. But give them the room. It's not always, I wouldn't say I'm always good at doing that, but I think that's one thing that I can always do better on. Yep. And think about when we're in a team environment.
How do you challenge yourself to be a better leader or continue that growth as a leader? Because as much as learning as an architect is a never-ending process, I think once you step into leadership, that too becomes a never-ending process. Just like the challenges you face as a leader, be it a global pandemic or economic downturn, or changing policy, or the threatening biggest news out of New South Wales. Your colleagues in Victoria watching very closely when the Architects Act was potentially on the chopping board.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you manage that as a leader? How do you keep challenging yourself to lead better?
I think you need to understand. For me, it's understanding the dynamics of a team. So, I'll answer the question in terms of our internal team. It's understanding the dynamics of the team, the strengths that people have, and where they may need some support, so that you can put together the team, give them the role and the support, so that there might be someone that's great with building character, someone that's really great with spatial planning. Put them together because they'll be complementary. Having a team that's just focused on, I don't know, let's say they love building character but didn't care about anything else, which is not the right approach. It needs to be realistic. But if you had too many people focused on that and not really considering the ground plane, they're just looking to the whole they think the facades are important, for instance, then you're going to get a project that's kind of not weighted or balanced properly. So it's kind of working through that, setting it up, and finding out what their strengths are, and personalities. Like, you've got to get the right team. If people aren't getting along, it's going to be reflected in the project and how it's put together and how smoothly you work. It doesn't matter how good you are as an actor. If you're not getting along with your team, then that's hard. So it's setting that up, knowing that you need to be flexible and change that around. And so that's really helpful. And listening, you got to listen. So we work with other actors. So working with Andrew Burns at Active, and so through that's in the Timby Arts, for instance, and it's being there, giving them support, listening to them, getting them to contribute, and for me just to kind of help them along. And the other person we're working there with is Eileen Sage with Amelia Holiday. So we're working together and knowing when to step back and not interfere, and then when to give them support and start to shape it. So I don't say we always get it right, but it's kind of a bit of a balancing act.
What's the toughest leadership decision you've had to make?
I'm not sure. Nothing comes to mind straight away, but I think there's always tough decisions. And I think you can't, in our projects, and when you've got a number of projects running, the worst thing you can do is hesitate or wait. I think you can actively procrastinate. So I'd probably, like I'm doing now, change the question around a little bit. But
the politician's answer.
Yeah, but you don't stagnate. You may not know the answer, but there's the time to explore something. But it's when the whole team's kind of waiting for something to happen, and you've just stopped. You need to keep moving forward, and whether that's exploring a particular idea or setting up something differently, but to stop and not have a response, not necessarily an answer, is probably the worst thing.
There's certainly a spark of age-old wisdom in just taking action and just starting. It's like when you're about to draw and the blank bit of paper is staring back at you. No, just make a mark.
Just make it. Just start anywhere. Just start anywhere. Yeah.
Just begin. That in so many times, a strategic advantage comes from moving first or moving quickly, or getting.
I totally agree. Yeah, exactly.
Or getting ahead of that one. There's a few terms that I actually want to circle back to in our conversation, because we mentioned 10-year blind housing and kind of the design resolution, or how it looks. Like you would never know whether or not it's social housing or affordable housing, or whether it's mixed as a building. I want to unpack some of these terms as well. Can you explain for our listeners the difference between social housing and affordable housing?
Okay, so there's three, in terms of housing types. There's social, affordable, and market housing. And so in the context of what I'm talking about, social and affordable is, in New South Wales, is the subsidy that is provided to residents if they meet a certain criteria, and it's salary based. So it's how much you earn. And so in terms of affordable housing, it's 20% to 70%. I wouldn't say discount, but a reduction in your rent, and it's based on your income. So it's a pro rata, it's a sliding scale. And so as an individual or a family, if you're earning a certain amount, your rent will be in response to that, regardless if it's a 1-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So if you've got 2 kids, you might be in a 3-bedroom place, and if it's just yourself or you and your partner, you might be in a 1-bedroom place, but you might be paying the same rent because your salary is similar. social housing is the 0 to 30%. That's that's picking up really low, very low income earners, and where affordable housing is very low to moderate. And market housing is in the 20%, but there's also intermediate housing, which we kind of talk about, which is in between. It's like the Nightingale, different models that are either client-led, architect-led, or resident-led, which start to fit in the middle, which is not as expensive as market, but it's not subsidised. So it's kind of this intermediate housing we kind of talk about.
But are these buildings seeing a mixed occupancy? There's certainly a school of thought at one point to avoid the social composter problem. You have the mixed occupancy, you have all sorts of people in there because it is prime real estate as well, and then people can be together without being, even though it's tenure blind, there's still an effective
tenure blind can be the appearance of the building, and it also can be to the people living there in terms of whether it's social, affordable, and market. So there's different schools of thought on that, and it will depend on the client. We're doing a lot of projects now where there's a component of affordable housing that's required in terms of delivering housing or making market housing more affordable. But there's a proper affordable housing component which a housing provider would look after. They would be salt and peppered. That's through the floor plate. So they could be sometimes 5, 10 to 15%. They'll be salt and peppered through the building. Sometimes in larger projects they may be in one separate building because it's easier for a community housing provider to manage. Because if you think about maintenance, they're trying to maintain the costs and keep them down. If they're spread out over 20 floors and there's only there's 20 of them rather than having them on one floor, that means there's going to be more people looking after or spending time travelling between each one to try and look after it. Or they've got projects where they've got 20 apartments across 20 different buildings, rather than having them all in one where it's easy for them to manage and look after. So it'll get down to scale and the housing providers' preferences as well.
I'm curious as to their business cases, right? Because the housing providers are fronting the money, but how are they getting subsidies from the government, or are they moving that investment themselves?
Typically, it's through there's different avenues, and I'm not an expert on this by any means. I'm more exposed to it and involved in it. Within the city of Sydney, each project that's developed, there's affordable housing contribution, which is then provided as a mechanism or as a financial model to a housing provider. So City West traditionally would receive that for a particular site, but they're quite independent as well. So that might be one means. The other means, as we're doing these affordable housing, or doing more high density projects where there's a contribution of 5 or 10% affordable housing, the developer will be delivering that as part of the project and then getting a housing provider to manage them for a period of time. And I'm sure there's other models. There's the HAF model as well, which is different ways that you can borrow money to manage things. But I'm starting to get right out of my comfort zone. I can design the buildings, but in terms of the financial models, they're quite varied. And I think they're highly kind of rationalising the money and the timing is really critical. So the time you put a development in to get approval to when it's built, there's different dates that you need to meet. So there's a lot of pressure to deliver the housing in a timely manner, which I think is good. I mean, we need to get more housing out there, affordable housing.
Are we going to hit our targets, do you think? Are we going to solve the housing crisis?
I think that's a big ask. I think we're kind of still behind. We'd have to be looking at different things. So I know that like Homes New South Wales are looking at different models of housing, like modular builds that are quicker to put together and do those type of things. I know there's a lot of incentive for approvals to get through quicker. So in New South Wales, I think they're working to it, but I think it's a really tall order in terms of just pulling the levers that we've got in terms of architecture and planning. I think there's got to be some other ways that we can look at that. But it's interesting. I think we're delivering about 10% of medium or high density housing in New South Wales at the moment. Wow. So in Sydney. So that's one of the facts that Carl, managing director, mentioned the other day, which is extraordinary, I think.
It's a massive number. Yeah. Do you think the public sector should be more involved in really pushing and driving these housing projects even more aggressively than they are, and taking more responsibility from bringing these buildings into existence, not just relying on developer contributions or talking about the necessity, but taking an even more active role?
I think so. That's. I think we need to look at it more broadly. So I think it's a complicated topic, but yes, I think personally, I think so.
You would know, as a former Melburnian, the famous K Street housing by Edmund and Corrigan, and the housing board did at the time. Not only did they have architects in-house who were driving the projects, but they gave the opportunity to young firms and new architects that started incredible careers after that to be able to get involved and bring these buildings into existence, create these projects. Left a fantastic architectural legacy in Melbourne and in Carlton and Fitzroy. Do you think we have some hope of doing that, or the climate has shifted and the scale of these projects are sitting with larger firms and practices such as yourself?
No, not at all. I think there's still opportunity there. Homes New South Wales definitely have a broad range of architects who are designing their projects. So there's not just a large practice. There's a range of architects, young or emerging practices, and larger firms doing them. So there's definitely a diversity of firms, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. So I think when I started architecture, like affordable housing or social housing wasn't really on the radar. Like no one was really interested. But I think as architects, it's the kind of quintessential making homes for people and housing people. I think is super important. And over the years, I've seen that change. And one of our so we've done a number of projects now. So the change in the enthusiasm from people in the office to be involved in them has grown, and to the point now where we're doing a pro bono project in Marrickville for women over 50 in terms of affordable housing project for Good Shepherd. So really good team. We're working with Hannah Tribe and her office on that collaboratively as well. And so it's like 55 or 60 apartments, and kind of low scale, but it's really good team. And we're just investing our time through enthusiasm and trying to get a really good outcome, and knowing it's for a really good cause. So I think that kind of evolution from people not being interested in affordable social housing projects now to doing them as a pro bono, especially for our office, is great.
You've made it cool now.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I think it needs to be done, and I think it needs that enthusiasm and that thought put into it, not just leaving it to secondary housing model that no one's really interested in or invest design time into.
Are you concerned that with the rise of rise of AI, that the volume of housing that we need to deliver and the push that this software might creep into some of our design space as well, not just doing the boring admin?
Yeah, I'd say it's already in our space. Like there's so much software that's out there that influences it, but it doesn't. I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps with creativity. I think it helps to translate some of your ideas and push it forward, because if you leave it alone, it ultimately comes up with something that's a bit ridiculous, and it's not really contextual in terms of understanding where the project is. We do use it in terms of we might take a still and use it for animation. We might look at some influencing or enhancing some of the character of it. I think the other aspects come in with planning. We don't really see that yet, but I think there's stuff where we can check drawings and make sure that they're consistent with the structural. That's awesome. I don't want to do that. Spend my life checking those kind of drawings, but there's software, AI software that will help us hopefully spend more time on design rather than checking or making sure that our waste pipe or the floor waste to a bathroom lines up with the hydraulic engine. That'd be great if they could tell us what that is. So I see it being beneficial there, but in terms of being creative and looking at design and having a project that's site-specific responds to the kind of, if you go to a site and you walk around and understand the context, you listen at the first, you're going to find out things that aren't obvious. And I think AI really finds stuff like that which is super obvious or just trawls the internet for what it thinks might look good there, but it's not really what's appropriate. And it may get there, but I don't think we're going to be out of a job soon designing. But there are aspects of our job that AI probably do a really good job on that when we may not, and we may be okay with that.
What do you think? You've been in a really senior position at Turner for more than 2 decades, if I could say that out loud.
I know it's a long time.
If I could say that out loud, what are the next decades ahead? Not just for your practice specifically, but broader from your profession, our profession, and really with a view on Sydney, because Sydney and Melbourne are quite different. How do you see the next 20 years going?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like when you talk about being here I joined Turner in 2002, and so it's a long time, 24 years, isn't it? So, but my role has changed dramatically. So I haven't always been a director here. I started off as a project architect, and I joined because we're collaborating with other architects. So we're collaborating with Peter Wilson, in Victoria Park, and back then I still do really love his work. And I really love his approach to design and his thought process. And so that drew me to the practice. And consistently through the 24 years, it's been the opportunity to collaborate with other architects in a meaningful way and projects, not just being the principal architect. And so for us, that's happening more and more. And I think with our experience on especially multi-res and mixed use projects and urban design, that we do work collaboratively with other architects because the project's getting bigger. They definitely need different people thinking about design and not having let's call it one hand designing it all. And not that our practice works in that way, but having that kind of diversity and different thinking on a precinct scale. So I see us collaborating more and sharing our knowledge with other architects and learning from them as well. And so that's been great. We've got a practice in London as well, an office. So Kevin Driver heads up the London office, and he was originally here. And what's good about Turner is that if you've got an idea or you've got something that you want to push or explore, there's room to do it. And obviously within a business sense, it's not a hobby, but there's different ways you can explore architecture. So if you're interested in urban design, you can go in that direction. If you're interested in affordable housing, you can push yourself in that direction and look at those particular aspects. So I see us collaborating more and I'd say diversifying more in terms of the work that we do, but our work is getting at a larger scale, but we're thinking about it more on a granular scale as well. And so it's interesting. I'm pretty excited about it. I sometimes get tired thinking about all the work we've got, but I think that's a good problem to have and to get that energy up.
What's the number one lesson you would want to pass on to the next generation or some of our young student graduate listeners?
Don't give up. I think in architecture there's always the moment that you want to give up. You've had enough. You can't do it. And whether that's something that's happened on site and the builder wants to change something, it may need to change, but don't give up in terms of coming up with a solution for it. And with a design, I'd say the same thing. You've got to explore different ways of doing something, but don't give up or give in to someone saying that you're not good at what you're doing. And like I mentioned earlier, your intuition is a really strong tool to use, and you don't really get taught that, but it's through life experience. And I think you need to rely on that. I may come back to haunt me, but I think intuition is a good one to take on board.
Certainly things do come back, and I feel like this conversation has also in a way come back full circle. So I'm mindful of the time. I will ask my last question, and that is, what gives you hope?
I think in the office is, for me, seeing the younger architects coming through and their level of enthusiasm in terms of the projects and how much energy they have. And sometimes I think, I wish I had that much energy to put into a project. So I'm really interested in that. And I think for me is to be able to guide them and to use that energy wisely and not be exhausted from it. So I kind of see my role changing and giving them that kind of support and that mentoring through projects. So I think, I don't know, have I answered that question? I'm not sure.
I think you have. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Dan Szwaj.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Ilana.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karam studio on Bunurong Country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Hi, this is Naomi Libba, composer and vocalist. Keep tuned to Radio Architecture, they rock.
G'day, this is Cash Savage and you're listening to Radio Karam.
You're tuned to Radio Karam, local community internet radio. This is Tzvi Belling, aka Z6.